So as Kelly said, my name is Lindsey Lieberman, and I am the Behavior and Training Coordinator here at the Oceanside campus of the San Diego Humane Society. And I have been here for over 9 years. And I am so pleased to share this presentation with you. And a couple of my own monsters are going to make some special guest appearances. So we'll take it away. Except I need to remember which screen to click on. Okay, so canine communication is not just one thing, it's a variety of things. It's important when we're, oh, my mom just raised her hand. This is modern technology at its finest. Kelly is going to figure out the hand raise portion of this presentation. Perfect. So canine communication is more than just one thing. It's not just what the dog is doing with their body in that instance. It's also looking at the context of it, how they communicate with each other, how they communicate with each other. And we're also going to talk about why it's so important to understand what dogs are saying at any given moment. So we're going to start with just the basics of canine body language, featuring my dear friend, Jerry. So there are a few main types of communication that we're going to look at. There are distance increasing signals, and that is the dog who is displaying the behavior is saying to the other one, I want to increase the distance between us. I want you to move away. Distance decreasing is I want you to come closer, and that's usually friendly. It's not some sort of sneaky come closer so I can injure you. Those are very rare dogs who do that. And then there are also displacement behaviors, and that's when they feel conflicted or uncomfortable. It's dogs who are fidgeting, as I might do if I notice my mom raise her hand again. So, so these are a couple of dogs displaying some very classic fear behaviors, low-level stress behaviors, and we're just going to go through them bit by bit, and I'm going to turn my cursor into a laser pointer. So with this guy up top, we have the head is pretty low here, the mouth is closed, and the brow is furrowed. Any one of those things doesn't necessarily mean that the dog isn't feeling super gravy about the situation, but when you put them all together, you've got this clear picture of a dog that's being particularly cautious or particularly fearful about something. The tail, we can look at and say that tail is low, but every dog has a neutral tail. As we look at other tails, you'll see that what might be low for one dog is actually natural or even high to another dog. There are some breed-specific things in that, a lot of sight hounds like greyhounds and whippets, their tails tuck right under. A lot of shepherds, their tails tend to hang fairly low. And then you have your dogs like Akitas and Huskies, whose tails curl right up over their back. But in this case, we do have the base of the tail, you can see, is dropped down below the natural end point of the spine. So there we've got that low tail, this sort of gently rounded spine, and the dog's closed mouth. A closed mouth doesn't necessarily always mean that the dog is feeling a particular way, but it's one of many little signals that we'll put into place. Our Chihuahua friend down here, we've got the ears pinned straight back behind the head, and this guy's got his ears back, but it looks a little bit different because of the different shapes of the ears. The ears are pinned back. We have the pupils are really blown. Those dilated pupils tell you that the dog is in a state of physiological stress. And then the nose flick over the tongue. We're going to see this a few times as we go through. This is a sign of discomfort. It's not necessarily my dog is licking his nose, everything is terrible, I'm very stressed, but it is a sign that the dog isn't exactly psyched about what's happening right now. Again, we have a tail that's dropped fairly low, and that nice rounded spine. And you can actually see in this photograph that it looks like the dog is shifting her entire weight back away from the camera. So the weight shift is something that we're going to be looking at over and over and over again. So both of these dogs are very uncomfortable. Both of these dogs are feeling some kind of fear and anxiety, but it's not like terribly crazy high level. One thing I do want to point out about the shepherd friend up here is that if you just saw this dog walking down the street, you probably wouldn't think that dog is in a state of stress. You'd probably just see a dog walking down the street. Some of these signals are very, very subtle, and oftentimes we don't notice these subtle signals until it's too late. Dogs give us these small indicators of how they're feeling when there's a big feeling inside, and then if we miss them, then the dog has to tell us in a much clearer way that they're uncomfortable. So, two dogs starting off, fear and anxiety. Oh, sorry, need to click the wrong. Okay, so we've got a couple more. Both of these dogs have furrowed brows. This one, you can't see the line that draws the brows together, but you can see how those little eyebrow spots are sort of arched up. They're picked up, so it's going to create that furrow. Both of these dogs have their ears back, but it looks so different because the dogs are of different types. So we've got the rose ears on this sighthound mix, and then the flat drop ears of this puggle. Again, we're looking at the weight shift of the dog, and you can see that the dog is keeping his body very, very low, or her body very, very low with that low tail. We've also have that sort of slinking gait over here. And again, the head is lower than the spine. We're really trying to make ourselves small. And you'll see this again and again with dogs that are fearful. They try to make themselves smaller than they actually are. It's the opposite of the cat that puffs up when they're upset, or even a dog raising his hackles, which we'll get to. So these are a little bit more subtle. We've got that tongue flick again. That's again that indicator of some level of stress and anxiety. I have to say that my 12-year-old dog, her name is Shine, and she flicks her tongue all the time. That's just part of her vocabulary. She is like sort of a generally anxious dog, but it doesn't mean that she's always uncomfortable all the time. Most folks probably have a lot of pictures on their phone of their own dogs with their tongues covering their nose, because dogs don't typically like to have cameras pointed at their faces. So you'll get a lot of those lip licks just as the dog says, I'm uncomfortable, or they turn their head away to say, I'm uncomfortable with this direct contact. So we've got the tongue flick. Again, you've got that weight shift. The dog is really tucking himself in, making himself smaller. And then this is a little bit more subtle. This dog, I'm assuming, was whipping his head. That looks to me like a very sudden turn of the head where we had someone unexpectedly touching the dog. The downside of using these photographs is we don't get the full gesture, but it does make it a little bit easier to pick things apart. So the head whip, if anyone has experienced that with a dog where they just suddenly like turn back, like, what are you doing back there? And it could be, what are you doing back there? I'm really not a fan of it. Or what are you doing back there? I'm terrified. And in this case, this dog is saying, I'm terrified. Our friend over here, I love this photograph. It's one of the clearest photographs of stress panting that you'll ever see. Stress panting is a specific kind of panting that dogs do when they're anxious. If you ever want to see some good stress panting, what you can do is go to the vet's office once people are actually allowed to be in the lobbies of vet's offices again, and take a look at the dogs around you. You'll see that the corner of the mouth is pulled back, and that creates this wrinkle back here for as the dog's lips just pull straight back. You'll also see that the tongue is sticking out, and it's not dropping. Most dogs that are happy and relaxed, their tongue is just flopping out of their mouth. It's just like just hanging from their jowls. But in this case, there's so much muscle tension in the dog's face. There's actually continued muscle tension in the tongue. So that's stress panting. So that's, again, the lips are pulled back. You can see all those back teeth, and then the tongue is sticking out a little bit straighter than it naturally would. So next slide. This Chihuahua. Everyone can see this Chihuahua, right? Just making sure. I think we had one person who was not.
Yeah, your mom couldn't see the photos, so I asked, does everybody else see the photos? And Debbie, can you see this one?
Okay, great. So.
Oh, hi, Sandy.
Hi, Sandy. Okay, wonderful. Thank you guys so much. So this Chihuahua is doing a paw lift. There are a lot of Chihuahuas in this world that regularly raise their front paw. It's not just Chihuahuas, but that's kind of the stereotype. A lot of small dogs do it. Some larger dogs do it too. And a lot of times some people will say that their dog does it when they want something, like their dog does it when they're begging. So it's a really interesting phenomenon. Dogs don't naturally hold their paw up when they want something, like they're begging alms. But what we do have is a combination of a dog that naturally offers this behavior. And then if it gets reinforced by a person, then it'll get repeated and repeated and repeated. So with the paw raise, it's a appeasement gesture, and it says to whoever that dog is interacting with, I don't mean any harm. I don't want to hurt you. And this is one of the really beautiful things about canine communication, is that it's very clear and it makes perfect sense. A paw raised means I'm only standing on 3 legs. And if I'm only standing on 3 legs, that means I can't charge forward and attack you. So it's very much an indicator, look, I don't mean any harm. We'll see dogs who turn their faces away to, like, when you're taking a picture of your dog and they immediately turn their face away from the camera. That's them saying, look, I don't want any confrontation. I don't want confrontation. And if they're facing away from you, they're not about to attack you. If they're raising a paw, they're not about to attack you. It's all beautiful common sense stuff. The other thing that we're seeing from this lovely little Chihuahua is whale eye. Whale eye, or some people call it half moon eye, is where you can see the whites of the eyes because the dog is facing one direction but looking in another. We'll see that a lot when dogs are conflicted, when their attention is split, when the dog doesn't necessarily want to turn their face from whatever they're focused on, but they do really want to keep their eye on what's happening back there. If you've ever seen a dog guarding a valued object, whether it's a toy or a bowl of food, you might see that the dog is displaying whale eye because they're not changing their face from the thing that they want to chew on, but they really want to know what you're doing over there to make sure you're not a threat. Again, we have that closed mouth, and you can see, again, there's muscle tension in the face. This is not a relaxed dog. It's very, very subtle. Most people if you saw this dog with that glorious, glorious collar sitting at a cafe somewhere, you might not think twice about it. But if you take this picture and you pull it apart, you can see not only we've got that, those ears are out, we've got the furrow in the brow, the whale eye, the raised paw, but also the tucked tail. All right, so moving on, we've got a little bit more extreme fear here. This beagle, I hope everyone can see it really, really, really intense muscle tension in this guy's face. We've got whale eye, that mouth is clamped closed. And we've got a very, very stiff posture. You can see the muscle tension all through this dog's body. This border collie right here, this is a really interesting photo because it's very, very possible that this dog is actually waiting for someone to throw a Frisbee. It is very possible, but you get a lot of the same body language because it's body language that indicates tension, anticipation, and being ready for what comes next. So a few things to point out with the border collie are, do you see how the toes in the front are spread? And they're really, you can see there's a slight grip to the ground. We have, that's definitely a sign of tension. And we'll look at more of that gripping toe later on. But we have the strong gaze, and the mouth is clamped shut here too, but you can see that there isn't nearly as much tension around the eyes as there are in some of these other photos. So this looks more like anticipation, but it could also be if there was someone suddenly standing there, like raising their hand up, the dog could feel a little bit threatened. Again, it's a stock photo that we found on the internet. Who knows what the context was? Probably a Frisbee. You can tell by how well groomed the dog is. So, if anyone has questions about this stuff, please do feel free to shout it out. Put them in the Q&A, and Kelly will, if it's pertinent to the immediate presentation, she will let us know. Okay, so we've got some dogs rolling around, and we have a few different ones here because I really wanted to show the difference between a dog who's asking for belly rubs and a dog who's really uncomfortable. Husky over here, asking for belly rubs. This is a chill, relaxed dog. The tail is flopping over. The back legs are just totally sprawled out. There's no tension in the face, right? And then we get to our shepherdy friend up here who's actively flicking his tongue. We have the ears back, a little bit of whale eye going on, although I think that might just be the angle of the camera. But there's tension in that dog's face. There's tension in that dog's face. Our friend down here, it's kind of an in-between because our tail is tucked. The face, the eyes seem very, very soft, but the ears are back and that leg looks lifted. This is, again, this is not necessarily a sign of submission in the like dominant submission alpha beta sense. What this is again, this is a signal that says, I have no intent to harm you. I have no intent to harm you. I'm exposing the most vulnerable part of myself. Please don't harm me. In a lot of ways, it's a dog saying uncle. You know, there are some celebrities that look to a dog rolling over as a sign that they have accepted us as alpha, whereas many modern positive reinforcement and force-free dog trainers feel that if a dog is at the point where they feel like they need to roll over, you've done something to really make that dog feel threatened, that they need to go into this this very vulnerable pose in order to get you to stop doing whatever it is. So again, rolling over doesn't always mean that the dog is asking for a belly rub, and it also doesn't necessarily mean that the dog is officially submitting to the person. So let's see here. On we go. I think I saw a raised hand. Kelly, did you figure out how the hand raises work?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Sonia, feel free to use the Q&A. If you can't, feel free to use the chat box. There goes my tea. Let me mute myself.
I want a cup of tea. I'll take
some
some
tea.
water.
With some tea.
Okay, while we wait for that question to come through, I'm going to move to the next slide. I think I'm going to, yes, okay. So we've got that tongue flick again. So this Dalmatian has some really, my dog rolls over and then puts his paws out and takes a paw, oh, so like he's doing this kind of a thing. That might just be something that he's learned gets him something that he likes, like a dog that raises their paw because they've learned that people like it. We can go into that in a little bit more detail at the end. So let's put a bookmark on that one. Okay, so our Dalmatian, we've got very, very clear muscle tension around the eyes. We've got the ears are sort of out and back. And again, we've got that tongue flick. This dog is probably not wanting to have anything to do with what's happening on the other end of the camera. Our Malamute friend right here is yawning, and the yawn is an interesting behavior. It's not necessarily a sign that a dog is tired. There have been a lot of interesting studies about dogs yawning. One of them is it stated that dogs who, if a person yawns near a dog, if the dog yawns after the person, the dog's stress level, their cortisol level, the stress hormone, tested through saliva, will indicate that the dog who yawns after a person is more stressed than a dog who doesn't yawn after a person yawns, which is a little bit convoluted. But basically, yawning is seen as a stress display or a displacement behavior when a dog is stressed. Some people think that the yawn is a bad thing because it's a sign of stress. But for other folks, the yawn is actually a stress release. So the dog yawns to release the stress that they're experiencing. That's something that I personally subscribe to, but it's not necessarily proven. We used to say, oh, a yawn is a calming signal. There's this whole group of behaviors that for a while was lumped as a group called calming signals. And people would say we do calming signals to our dogs to help them calm down. And you'd get a lot of people working with dogs and they'd be licking towards their nose or yawning. But what that can end up doing is telling the dog, there's something stressful going on. Look at the stress signals I'm displaying. And therefore the dog is displaying this behavior. So yes, Sonia, the question of so the question of dogs yawn to calm down, sort of. So that's the general thought. But what people used to think was that dog, if you yawned, you could yawn to help a dog calm down. But the reverse was actually true. If a person yawns, that the dog would actually potentially become more stressed because they see, oh, the person must feel stressed. That's why they're trying to release stress. So I must be stressed by something else that's going on. So it sort of had the dogs that were more sensitive to the people actually had increased stress when the person yawned. I hope that makes sense. But to me, when I see my dogs yawn outside of the context of bedtime, I see it as them actively releasing their own stress. So I don't see yawning as a bad thing. It's a self-calming behavior for the dogs. It might indicate that they're more stressed than we all wish they would, which isn't a good thing, but the yawn itself, not a bad thing. Does that make sense? I hope. Okay, so the yawn. All right, so now we're getting into a different kind of distance increasing behaviors. Before, those were all the distance increasing behaviors because we wanted, because the dogs were, I'm afraid of you, I want you to go away. These are more, I don't like you and I want you to go away. So these guys, you can see, this to me is one of the creepiest pictures of a dog eye contact. That is not a loving look in that dog's eyes. That is direct, hard eye contact. In the shelter world, we talk about the difference between soft eye contact and hard eye contact, or soft eye contact and direct eye contact. This is direct and hard eye contact. You can see that the dog's mouth is closed and the ears are sort of out and flat, but they're not, the dog isn't necessarily relaxed. The dog isn't making a particular expression, but you're seeing the muscle tension in the dog's face. This guy over here, this is a really nice example of solid weight shift. You can see that the dog's weight shift is forward. So he's leaning forward onto his front paws, indicating this is my space, or I want you to move back. Dogs will move toward another dog in a certain manner to indicate that they want that dog to go away. For all of you that have heard the the saying that if your dog like runs loose in the front yard, you should run away from the dog to get the dog to chase you. That's a distance decreasing signal. Running away from a dog in a sort of playful chasing way gets the dog to chase you. A dog moving towards you in a direct path, in a straight line, is threatening and telling you to back up. So we've got a tail way up over the neutral position. We have hard, direct eye contact. And this guy is probably between barks. I'm assuming this is a between barks face. It's possible that he was just standing like that growling, but this is that square posture, that strong stance, direct eye contact, everything here. These are hard lines and right angles. And if you compare that to our fearful friends, where everything is curves and soft, right? And then we go back up to these more offensive dogs, and we get those direct straight lines. So moving on. I love this picture so much. This is a pucker. This girl is puckering. I found this picture probably about, oh gosh, over a decade ago. And I can't find the source, but I remember that this dog was female and she was featured on some blog. But she's not only giving whale eye, but she's puckering. And this pucker is not just that the mouth is closed, but that the dog is actively pushing the lips forward. And you can kind of see that a little bit here, where you can see where the whiskers would be are just a little bit more front facing because the dog's mouth is being pushed forward. But in this girl, she's really actively pushing her lips forward. The next stage from a pucker is where the dog is showing their teeth. And we're gonna see that in a slide or two. So we've got, I'd say that this is very similar muscle tension in the face to that first dog with the direct eye contact. But it's a little bit more threatening because we have the whale eye or the side eye and that pucker. And then our friend over here is displaying some beautiful hackles, absolutely gorgeous hackles. So hackles are a dog's hair raising up on their neck, their back, or even over their butt. I used to work with a Labrador named Alice, and I would say that Alice the camel had two humps because she would get a big pile of hackles over her shoulders and then a big pile of hackles over her rump. So every dog gets hackles in a different place, but the standard is usually right around the withers or on the back of the neck. The fancy technical term for that is piloerectory response, and that just means that the hair is sticking up. That does not necessarily mean that the dog is being aggressive. It does not necessarily mean that the dog is afraid. What the best description of it that I've heard so far is that the dog has a heightened level of arousal. So we have a little bit more adrenaline pumping through the system, as well as some level of uncertainty about the situation. That is the best description I've heard, because you can have dogs that are very excited but don't have their hackles up, very aggressive and don't have their hackles up, very afraid and don't have their hackles up. But when there's a little bit of like, I don't know about the situation, that's when we'll often see hackles, which is why you see them so frequently around unfamiliar dogs and unfamiliar people if you have a dog that's sensitive to those two triggers. All right. I love these guys. Now we're getting to the fun stuff. So we talked about the splayed gripping toes. This Chihuahua has some delightfully splayed and gripping toes. If anyone has ever held a terrified Chihuahua, they're just digging their claws into you for all it's worth. And that's what they would be doing to the ground. If anyone has worked at a vet clinic or has taken their small dog to the vet clinic and the dog is put on the table, they're gripping the top of that table because it's a preparatory sort of behavior. This isn't something that's intentional. There are some behaviors that are intentional and some behaviors that are just instinct's not the word I'm looking for, but yeah, an instinctual response, like a reflex. And gripping the toes is definitely a bit of a reflex because you're gaining purchase to be able to move very quickly in one direction or another. We've got those ears all the way out, all the way back. And if I had to guess, I'm assuming that this is a fearful Chihuahua, not a murderous one. What's telling me that not only the position of the ears and how pinned back they are, but the dilation of the pupils, which you may or may not be able to see. But the Chihuahua looks like he has blue eyes, but the pupils are pretty big inside those little blue circles. And here you can see that the dog's lips are pulled back. Compare that to our friend over here, whose mouth is actively pushed forward. There's a lot in the way that the dog holds its mouth that indicates whether they're feeling offensive or defensive. But either way, we have a huge amount of muscle tension in both of these faces. We've got direct eye contact, one where it's very sort of constricted and it's almost like a laser beam. And in this case, we've got these big, like lamp-like orbs, say, like indicating the fear. So defensive versus offensive again. And then we have our really angry dogs. Our Doberman friend is displaying full vertical retraction, as is our herding friend. I define full vertical retraction. So vertical retraction is a term for a dog lifting their lip. The layman's term is lifting the lip. In these cases, the partial vertical retraction is where you just see the upper teeth, but when you can see gums, when you see those bright pink shiny gums, that says full vertical retraction to me. And compared to our last two, where we've got the Chihuahua and the sort of houndy thing, we can see again the difference. Here's our fearful dog. We've got those dilated pupils. We've got the ears pulled back. We've got that furrow in the brow. We still have all that same very, very aggressive behavior, but it seems to be fear-based versus our Doberman, where again, we have that laser-like stare, direct, hard eyes, and the ears are out more than they are back. I hope none of you guys have seen dogs making faces like this firsthand, because it's pretty unpleasant. But it's these little subtle signals where you can tell the difference between angry and terrified. And then we have the smiles. So one of these dogs is smiling, and one of these dogs is snarling. I hope you guys can all tell the difference. This is our snarling dog, and this is our smiling dog. I'm hoping that you guys have mostly heard of the submissive grin. Some folks, it's when you see it the first time, it's really disconcerting because you don't normally see a friendly dog's incisors and canines when you're interacting with them. So it can be really frightening, but it's very, very different from this guy. So in this case, you can see this dog is actually, I believe, guarding the person from this dog whose giant paw you can see right here. But we have that hard direct eye contact, all those wrinkles as the dog is lifting the nose up. It's almost like the dog is pulling their whole face up from the front of the nose back towards their head. Whereas in this case, the dog is lifting the sides of the lips. So it's subtle, but it's there. Really, when you've got a dog and you're not sure, is this dog smiling or is this dog really, really unhappy? You can look at not just the face, but everything else, because this dog is squinting, No dog who's snarling is going to keep their eyes closed and squinty. With the ears are pretty relaxed, and most of the time when a dog is smiling, they're also very loose in their body and probably doing like a wiggle or a low wag. They might even be peeing themselves a little bit. So those are the differences between the smile and the snarl. Additionally, there's probably some noise that comes along with this one, whereas you don't usually get many vocalizations with a smiling dog. Okay, so now we get our happy, relaxed dogs. So we've got, we talked about hard eye contact. This is soft eye contact. Those almond eyes, the relaxed face. You can see how the lips are just sort of falling off of the top of the muzzle. There's a little bit of a wrinkle in the forehead, but that to me just looks like it's because the ears are being pushed forward because the dog is alert to whatever squeaky toy that person has above their camera. But it's just a very relaxed, soft face. That dog might not be wagging his or her tail. That dog might be so relaxed that their whole body is still. These are my two girls. This is Shine and Stormy. Shine was probably about 10 and Stormy was about 8 when I took this. But you can see that they're both very happy and relaxed, although they have very different bodies. So Shine, who is brown dog number 1, has these upright ears that face forward when she's happy, and her tail is way up. Stormy, who is a greyhound mix probably, even though her ears are up for her, they're still back. They're still back. And you can't see her tail, but because she is a sighthound shepherd mix probably, even when she's happy, her tail is low. One thing to note is that a wagging tail does not mean a happy dog. A wagging tail does not mean a happy dog. I'm going to say it one more time. A wagging tail does not mean a happy dog. A wagging tail indicates a dog who is excited. You get excited if you're watching a scary movie. You get excited if you are about to get into a fist fight. You get excited if you're about to go into a concert. Excitement is a state of heightened arousal. It means that there's, again, more adrenaline pumping through the system, and the other chemicals that are floating through your brain at that time, that's what indicates what the actual state of excitement is, whether it's you know, positive and beneficial, or if it's a little bit more unpleasant. But when we're looking at tail wags, the happier the dog is, the looser and wider the wag is. For those of you who have Labradors, you know, they wag their tails like this. It's almost just like on a hinge behind them. Whereas some dogs have these sort of very swishy tails. A lot of shepherds have that swishy. If you've got a boxer at home, this is all you get. This is all you get. But if you've got a boxer, you definitely know the difference between like this wag and this wag. So, you know, keep in mind that if the dog is wagging their tail, they're excited, but depending on if the wag is high or low or neutral, it can mean a lot of different things. The faster, tighter, and higher the wag, usually the more anxious the dog is, or possibly anticipating some kind of event. So like if you think about two dogs meeting for the first time, which we'll see a little bit later. All right, more happy, lovely, and relaxed dogs. We've got those soft faces with the lips just hanging down. You can see how the tongue is just dropping here. Ears are out. We've got, again, a furrow brow, but that's because everything's being pushed forward. There's nothing in this face to indicate tension. These are soft faces. They're relaxed faces, and the eyes are open. The eyes are, and I say open, not in the sense that they're like the eyelids are open, but that it's soft eye contact or squinting. A lot of Chihuahuas will do this, like this little squint. I think is the next slide this Chihuahua. No, not yet. All right. So this is the same dog. These come from the website Eileen and Dogs. She runs a wonderful dog blog. I hope she doesn't mind my taking her photos for this. The caption is there. It's hers, Eileen and Dogs. And this is her dog, Clara. And you can see this is Clara when she's happy, with an open mouth, soft eyes, and a relaxed expression. And this is Clara when she's stressed. So we've got the lips pulled back, that stress pant where the tongue is sticking right out, and the furrow in the brow. I mean, it almost looks like a different dog between the two. So it's just, if you take a picture of your dog at the vet and then you take a picture of your dog hanging out at home, you're going to get some very, very different responses. The play bow. So in terms of distance decreasing signals, what we want when we want the dog to, or when the dog is saying, I want you to come closer, you can't get more clear than this. The play bow is the universal dog signal for let's play. And there are a few different forms to it, but you can see in all of these dogs, there's no tension in the faces. The mouths might be closed or open depending on the dog, but you just see the movement and it's bouncing and it's easy. I love this little terrier guy because not only is everything about this picture just soft and loose, but look, his toes are actually coming up off of the turf. His weight is on the elbows. There's no tension in those feet. All of his weight is on the back of his arms. So with these guys, you can see the tail is up. So we've got some excitement there. In this case, the tail is swishing. And in this guy, we've got another raised tail again, but all soft expressions. Play bow is chest and elbows towards the ground, but all the way up in the air. Oh yeah, there's the Chihuahua squint. There's that Chihuahua squint. This is a dog I know named Darwin. And you can see perfectly relaxed and majestic. And again, the toes are just lifted off of the ground because his arms are just resting. There's no need to put pressure down. A very relaxed little Chihuahua. The mouth is closed, but you see no tension. He's a hilarious little dog. We've got some great smiles here. So this is a nice example of the open mouth, and again, the mouth just, or the lips just hanging off of the dog, squinting. We've got the crossed paws. You can see the lack of muscle tension in the legs. This is just a very, very relaxed dog. Oftentimes, if I'm working with a dog in a down and I actively want the dog to be more relaxed, I will manufacture these shifted hips that you see below. It's not usually as dramatic as having both legs out to the side, but you can lure the dog slightly to the side so that you can manufacture that relaxed position. And when you put the dog in a position where they can let their body weight just fall into the ground, oftentimes the actual relaxation will follow after that. So we have all the pieces. We have all of these different little bits of language. So now we have to put it in context and see these dogs interacting with each other. So we have these intros. We talked about that high tail. There it is. That's partially just because it's a beagle. And his weight shift is forward and has direct eye contact, while this weird little spaniel-y guy is actively shifting weight away, leaning back away. Both dogs have their mouths closed. This isn't a terrible introduction by any means, but you can see that there's one dog that's being a little bit more confident and one dog who's just a little bit more wishing there was some more social distancing happening. Same thing down here. We have this larger dog actively trying to get very, very close to the small dog. And again, look at the weight shift. The large dog is really leaning forward against the leash, while the little guy is also leaning against the leash, but in the opposite direction. Those ears are back. Both dogs have their mouth closed. This isn't a super relaxed introduction. And we've got a furrowed brow, ears back on this one. It's like almost like the polar opposite. They're doing this dance where the large dog is leaning everything forward, moving everything towards the other dog. And the little guy is just leaning everything back and away. This is a really nice example of a polite interaction. Dogs don't approach each other in direct lines. You know what I was saying earlier about how the dogs that are more fearful or anxious, it's all sort of S curves and rounded movements. And the dogs that are being more confrontational, it's straight lines and right angles. Dogs, to be polite, will walk in around each other in an arc. They will approach each other in an arc. This sort of greeting, you can see these little guys circling back and around each other. This is polite to dogs. Again, if a dog is going to attack, they're not going to waste their energy to arc. They're going to go in a straight line. So that arced approach is a way of indicating, look, I'm wasting my energy. I don't intend any harm to you. This is still a pretty tense interaction, as you can tell by the tails being all spiked up and floofy, with the mouths pretty tightly clamped closed. Whereas these guys are a lot more relaxed about it, but I hope everyone can see that on this little terrier over here, the weight shift is all the way away from the min pin. So it's subtle. This stuff is really subtle. And as we'll see when we get to some videos, it can happen very, very quickly. Turning away, again, we talked about that when we were talking about cameras, when you're trying to take a picture of your dog. This is a way of disengaging. This is a very subtle but very profound signal that says, I don't want to have anything to do with this moment. I don't want to interact with you. I don't want to cause trouble. I don't want you to cause trouble. If you ever see a mama dog playing with a litter of puppies, the first thing that she does when she's done with the puppies is this, just turns her head away. She wants nothing to do with it. The sniffing is, it can be a displacement behavior. It can also be another form of the turning away, where we're actively breaking eye contact. We're actively bringing the dog's focus away from the other dog. So in some ways it can be a displacement behavior where the dog is trying to self-calm by breaking that eye contact. In other ways, in other times it can be intentional, where the dog is saying, look, dude, chill out. I don't want a part of it. Again, it depends on the context, it depends on the dog, but this is also something that you can manufacture for your own dog. If you're out on a walk and a dog is staring your dog down and your dog is not psyched about that, you can drop treats on the ground to give your dog an excuse to look away, to give your dog an excuse to break eye contact. This is especially good if your dog is the snothead who's getting a little bit confrontational, because you can encourage your dog to break his or her eye contact. In my case, it's break his eye contact. And then I just love this. You can see the little baby dachshund hackles right here, where they're just not totally certain of each other. And we have the dog that's got his head up, a little bit more confident, versus this one, where again, we have that furrowed brow, that closed mouth. This is probably a fine interaction. I don't want you guys to walk away thinking every time a dog furrows their brow, it means they're terrified. But this all happens in such a quick sequence that it helps to break it down into these little moments, so you can just sort of get a better gauge for it. Okay, so this is a very, very short video of dogs diffusing conflict amongst themselves. This black and white pitty here, his name is Timber, and he does a technique called splitting. And it basically is, well, we'll just go for it. He walks directly between the two dogs to diffuse the situation. Did you see how he even gave like that little, like a little butt? Like he like, yeah, there it went. His butt just went right towards, oh gosh, I can't remember his name. Droopy. It was Droopy. And then Oscar was the bulldog. So we'll watch this one more time, just because it's so quick. We'll watch it in slow motion, so you can get a little bit more of what's going on. So Droopy's being pushy, and you see how Oscar was avoiding eye contact. Droopy's very frontal, very confrontational, tail straight up and wagging. That's called flagging. That high, just the tip of the tail wagging is called flagging. Oscar's trying to be non-confrontational, turning his face away, and Timber comes in and saves the day, and right, boom, there, he sticks his butt over in Droopy's direction. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I just love that. Timber did an amazing job. Yes, such a good boy indeed. So, aggression. Most of the time, if our dog exhibits any aggression, we are terrified. We are upset. We hate it. But to dogs, aggression is normal and aggression is acceptable. This slide is a border collie being wildly inhibited towards this puppy who is probably about to steal this stick. This dog, while he looks like Cujo in this instance, is not biting the puppy. He's very clearly showing the puppy what is not okay to do. And that's the thing. For dogs, aggression is a spectrum, and they go through a whole series of steps before they do anything nasty. And oftentimes, I mean, this is just how dogs say, I'm not comfortable with this, or I don't like this. If a dog is growling, then the dog is telling you how they feel. If a dog snaps at another dog, that dog is saying, please stop doing that. Or in some cases, not please, just stop doing that. In this case, I don't think there was a please. But in these cases, you might see this dog as being aggressive. Like if this was your little terrier that you took to your friend's house, you might think that your dog was being a real jerk when this dog just wants to say hi. Well, I'm guessing that it probably took a few steps before this guy decided to show his teeth to the little sight hound thing. There was probably some side eye. He was probably choosing not to engage. In this case, this dog, I'm not sure if that's I think it's probably just a chocolate lab, probably had a few choice words for this boxer before we got to the point where he needed to go full on, yelling with teeth. Because the boxer was clearly playing in a way that the retriever found unpleasant. It's really important that we don't just think dogs can't show aggression, that we allow them to display all of their correct behavior as long as it's safe. As long as it's safe. If you have a dog that's grumpy and doesn't want other dogs coming near them, that's probably not a good dog to take to the dog park. That dog is not going to get socialized by going to the dog park. That dog is just going to, every single time he goes to the dog park, have to tell all the other dogs, I don't like being here. I don't want you near me. Please stay away. Please stay away. So these are not necessarily dogs being aggressive. They're just saying, I'm not psyched about what's happening right now. So this is a very, very, very inhibited Malamute schooling a really snotty German Shepherd named Greg. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but you'll see. So there she goes. So you see how she's not engaging with him. She's not making any social contact with him. She's actively turning away from him, except for the times that she's telling him no. She's not being aggressive. She's just telling him to back off. And he's not picking up what she's putting down. She's tolerating that because it's more appropriate, which is lovely. This is what dogs do. They teach each other how to be good dogs. If it's at the point where the dog who's doing the correcting is being tortured, then that's not such a good thing. But see how she's being much more tolerant of Greg as long as he's displaying these appropriate behaviors. When he does something like that paws on, elicits a very quick response. As soon as he does, she's like, save me, save me. So no, he's just not getting it. But at least with that barking, he's trying something that he hadn't tried before that does not involve paws on. So I think we're gonna skip the last minute of of watching Greg get schooled by Princess. But you can see, like, she was snarling, she was baring teeth, she showed a lot of teeth to him. But that's not aggression, that's correction. That's telling him what's okay and what's not okay. So this is kind of a funny video. This is my dog Kit. And this is the very first night I brought him home and how he interacted with my girls, Shine and Stormy. They had met at the shelter previously, but this was me bringing him into the home for the first time. And there's a lot of body language going on here. There's a whole lot. So we'll go ahead and start that. And it's body language from 3 dogs, and they're all sort of feeling very differently about things. So here we go. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we've got some sniffing. You can see how the tails are all going in different ways. Kit's not so sure about stuff. Welcome home, Kitten. Yeah, as his full name is Kitten. So look at how different all the tails are. He's so stiff. He's so stiff, and you see that lip licking and the whale eye. Did you guys catch that? It was just right there. Lip lick, whale eye. Stormy's bouncing around. Shine's being a little bit pushy right here. She's doing a lot of standing over him. He's not quite sure what to make of it. He feels a little bit cornered, but Shine's still trying to initiate play. That's kind of a wonky kind of play bow, because you can see that it was sort of that bouncy play bow motion, but she wasn't dropping her weight. She was keeping her weight forward. This is, I'm playing, but I'm the boss. And that's my girl. So it's, I know there was a lot happening in there. Like, we could pull it apart looking at each one of the dogs, but the reason that I like that video so much is because it shows the complexity of it. You know, it's not just one dog is friendly and one dog is mean, or all the dogs are friendly. You have all the dogs are okay in that situation, but one dog is tense. One dog is dancing around because she doesn't know exactly what to do with herself. One dog is being a little bit pushy, but it's still social. It's the way, if you get a whole bunch of kids on a playground together, they're all going to interact differently, and there's going to be some stress, there's going to be some tension, but it's not necessarily bad if there's stress or tension. You just have to make sure everyone is comfortable with it. I do want to point out that you can see Kit is wearing his leash. This leash was dragging. This is a safety measure that I put into place because if anything did happen, I wanted to be able to remove him from the situation without having to grab collars. If anyone has ever grabbed a dog's collar in the middle of a scuffle, you know it probably doesn't end super well for you. So just a quick safety tip. This is going to be, we're going to keep this. This is like, this whole video is 8 minutes, but we're going to watch it pretty briefly. But this is a great video of two dogs greeting for the first time, and it's very tense for the little snow dog guy. This guy, the little red dog, is trying to make some appeasement gestures. And then how long did that take? How long did that take before that big snark? That big snark. So they show it. This whole video plays again in slow motion, and we'll watch a piece of it. But so we have, and this is called because when people get in the way, because the dogs were managing themselves just fine until the people got involved. So we have these appeasement gestures from this little red dog, we've got the licking of the face. You can see how square our husky friend is. The little red dog's got his ears back. He's avoiding eye contact. His tail was, because remember in the earlier portion, swish, 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 while the husky's standing very square. Again, think about that weight shift. Where's the weight on these dogs? The husky's keeping it all in the front, where the little guy's being a little bit looser. We've got curves and rounded shapes here, and square posture and right angles here. So he's trying to diffuse the situation and make friends. The husky's standing pretty stiff. The people are just doing their thing, not a whole lot going on. And then, dun, 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 the husky finally does one little semi-soft gesture. He starts to show a little bit of social behavior, so we're softening up a little bit. Look at that square stance though. And again, see how this tail is so arched and high? Even got some hackles back there. The tension building. And then the husky makes this move, turning away. So we finally have some diffusing of tension from the husky. The owner pulls on the leash, and what happens? Right? So, okay, so the question came up, do you suggest that the humans should have walked them together with a perimeter? So in this case, I think what would have been beneficial was if we needed to separate the dogs, rather than using leash tension, to call the dogs away from each other. So we don't, so that way there's no, because oftentimes, I don't know if any of you have been like tense and then someone like suddenly puts their hand on your shoulder and you jump. That's what happened in this situation. It was, they were figuring it out, they were doing okay. And then when the person totally unintentionally was just like, okay, it's time for us to go, it just pulled that husky out of the social realm into the discomfort going after you realm. So the other thing that can be done too is if you are intentionally introducing two dogs that are having a tense introduction, if one dog is more loose and social than the other, then that's the dog that you put any leash tension on if you have to do that. That way, you're not making a tense dog tenser. You're removing the dog that maybe can handle a little bit of leash tension. Let's see here. All right. And there's my girl Kisa. That was my first dog, and she was wonderful. So, you know, we talk about how important context is. And I think that from everything that we've learned, I hope everyone can see that this is a really incredibly tense dog. I'd love it if some folks could put in the chat what they think this dog is experiencing right now. Like just generally what sort of emotions this dog is feeling. Nervous, fearful, unsure, scared. Yeah. Not a happy dog. Not a happy dog. Yeah. Uh-huh. You guys ready to see the rest of the picture? That's what's happening. The dog is getting hugged by a little girl. And I bet when they took this picture, the parent thought that this was just the parent thought that this was just absolutely the sweetest moment to see their little girl hugging this dog. If you don't know how to see what the dog is feeling, you don't know what the dog is feeling. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. Oftentimes we see lack of aggression as the dog being fine. We see dogs who are simply not growling, not cowering, not snarling as being okay, but they're simply tolerating something. That dog in the last picture was tolerating being hugged by that little girl, but that doesn't mean that the dog was fine with it. So I used this example with someone recently. I was speaking with a young woman, and I was saying, like, have you ever been on a date where it's really not a good date, but there's nothing so bad about it that you need to throw your drink in the person's face or like get up and leave the room? So you might say that you're fine with it, but you're probably throwing out enough signals to let everyone know that it's not okay. Like it's not so uncomfortable that you have to do something, but it's not a good time. And that's what we see a lot of from our dogs, that they're not having a good time. No matter how much we're having a good time, no matter how much we love it, they're not having a good time. And we see our intention. Oh, I'm glad you liked the date analogy. We see our intention as making it okay for what we do, that the dog should understand that we're doing this out of love. But this right here, this hug, this dog is showing very, very similar body language to this dog right here. In both of these cases, the dog is receiving some care, some form of care. In this case, it's affection from a person, and in this case, it's medical care. But in both of these situations, you can see that the dog is tolerating it, but wildly unhappy. Again, closed mouth, furrowed brow, whale eye in this case. We've got the dog, his toes aren't totally relaxed. They're holding on pretty tight. In this case, I think you can even see like a little possible like edge of pink tongue as the dog is probably trying to lick his lips. We've got that furrowed brow, and then this poor dog, pupils totally blown, mouth clamped shut, just getting a hug from mommy. I think we have enough time. I'll show this. This was a video that I took of sort of a fake exam from our medical department as observation training for staff. But I want you to watch the dog. I want you guys to watch the dog and see. So we got our lip lick, the tail's wagging, but she's clearly not happy. Lots of lip licking. She's struggling. She's tolerating it. We're not seeing any aggression from her, but she clearly isn't okay with it. And so right there, I want to point something else out. When the doctor got directly in front of her face, the next thing the dog did was look for exits. First, she looked in one direction, and then she looked in the other direction. She was trying to figure out how to get out of there. She was also trying to avoid a direct confrontation with the veterinarian, who's a lovely person, by the way. This doctor is a lovely, lovely human being. So she's struggling. We've got some stress panting going on. It was like almost a half yawn there. And she's just trying. Oh, there's our big yawn. There she is. I mean, and so in these, in all of these cases, we'll skip the ear meds, or that was the eye meds. You can see that this dog isn't fine. She's not comfortable. Is it the end of the world that she's going through this treatment? No, it's not the end of the world. She's not posing a threat to the staff, and this isn't traumatizing. We're not at a level of trauma for this dog, but we are looking at a dog who's uncomfortable, and you need to be able to recognize when your dog is uncomfortable. This is just, I'm just going to show this. This is very, very quick. But this is a clip from the movie Best in Show. And people are terrible to their dogs in this movie. But this dog, even though this dog is an actor, look at how she's trying so hard to avoid eye contact. This dog was trained to be comfortable in this situation. But even here, we've got the furrowed brow, the mouth stays closed. No one has the busy bee. But look at her looking for that exit, looking for that exit. Even dogs in Hollywood will still show these same stress displays. I think she's also probably looking for her handler who has a cookie for her. But someone really, really needs to get busy bee. But again, avoiding eye contact, avoiding eye contact. Yeah. How do you feel? How do you think that dog felt in that situation? That was not good. And if that had been a real dog having to go through that, how many takes did that poor dog have to go through that for? So, all right. And then this is my dog Kit. These are this is that little cattle dog that made his ridiculous intro into my home. So communication doesn't occur in a vacuum. It's not just about what the dog is doing. It's who is the dog, or what is the dog communicating with? What is the goal of the communication? If the dog is uncomfortable, why is the dog uncomfortable? What is making the dog uncomfortable? You can say my dog is afraid. Okay, your dog's afraid. So what is making your dog afraid? Who is your dog displaying that fear to? It's really, really important that we remember that the dog's reality counts too. When we were looking at those pictures of Hugs or the vet, we know that we were just showing our dog how much we care. We were just telling our dog that we love them. But in those cases, we can't say I was just being friendly or I was just hugging my dog, because from the dog's perspective, you were being, not you guys, I'm sure you guys would never hug your dogs if they didn't like it, but the person who was performing that very invasive very confrontational handling on the dog sees as a threat. And what the reality of the situation, whether or not threat was intended, doesn't matter if threat was perceived. You can't tell a dog they're not going to hurt you. You can only make it so the dog doesn't feel threatened. I hope that makes sense. Behavior exists on a fluid continuum. I mean, as you saw from these videos, it's not static, and the changes can be very subtle, and they can be very, very fast. And behavior indicates an emotional state as well as a physiological state of arousal. So a dog can be fearful or anxious, but not necessarily up to an 11, versus a dog who is fearful or anxious and very, very highly stressed. You know, those different signals are going to be like the pupil dilation, the muscle tension. That shows a lot more stress and arousal than just a dog who is showing more subtle signals like a paw raise or looking away. The single moment is never the complete picture, and dogs are not good dogs or bad dogs. You know, one of my sort of catchphrases is every dog is a good dog, but, and every dog has a different but. Behavior is really like a kaleidoscope, which is why I put the totally unnecessary kaleidoscope graphic in there, because it's constantly changing, and it changes also depending on the situation. The way, if you're looking through a kaleidoscope and you're looking at a certain kind of light, it's going to appear differently. As you turn it or as the beads fall, it's going to be different, but it's all made up of what's on the inside and what's on the outside. And that's really what we're looking at with this. Is it's a combination. Behavior exists and is created through a combination of what's inside the dog in terms of history and in terms of genetics, as well as what's occurring outside of the dog. We'll get to that question in a second. We've got a couple questions that we'll get to in just a moment. So oftentimes we'll label our dogs. Some dogs will say that their dog is sweet or their dog is friendly. But more importantly, we need to give our dogs credit for being multifaceted creatures just like us. I am not always friendly. I am not always short with folks. I am not always funny. I'd like to believe that I'm always funny, but I know Kelly's thinking like, no, you're always funny, Lindsay, always. No, but you know, we have these ideas about our dogs, like my dog is this, or my dog is this. And that's not the case. Our dogs display this in certain contexts at certain times. So in this case, you know, this dog has a post-it next to it that says this dog is aggressive. It's the same dog, but this time the post-it says, the dog growls and runs away when children pull on his ears. If your dog growls at strangers, is your dog aggressive? Or does your dog display a defensive stress response at unfamiliar people? There's a big difference between saying my dog is aggressive to strangers or my dog displays a defensive stress response, right? So remember that it's not, you have to look at the behavior and not label the dog, not put that blanket statement on a dog. So how can we help our dogs? We can be better guardians when we understand what they need or want in a particular situation. Look at your dog. Look at your dog. Don't just look at your dog and think, there's my beautiful dog, I love you so, so much, but see your dog. See what your dog is saying. Interpret your dog's behavior. And can you do anything to make it better? Can you do anything to make it better? Are you in a situation where you can? If your dog is displaying stress signals, is there anything you can do to alleviate the stress? If your dog is showing defensive behavior towards an unfamiliar person or an unfamiliar dog, is it going to be helpful for your dog to be told, no, be quiet, he's not going to hurt you? Or is it going to be helpful for your dog for you to move him 10 feet away so that he has more space, so that he becomes more comfortable? And that's really what it becomes. You have to be an advocate for your dog. You have to listen when they speak, tell other people how they feel, because we all have that friend that really thinks that dogs love them. And so they're just very invasive and pushy with the dogs they meet. And tell them that, you know, my dog isn't comfortable with that. I can tell because I know that my dog is feeling afraid right now, because let them know. You can educate them. And then if you make a change, see how the dog responds to that. So in my last example, if the dog is growling at another dog, you have the option of moving your dog away. And then does your dog stop growling? Well, then you've made it a little bit better. You've made it a little bit better. If you are bathing your dog and they're very tense and they're very stressful, maybe turn the pressure down on the water and see if that alleviates some of the stress. You know, there are a lot of small things that we can do, or better yet, if you're bathing your dog, put a licky mat covered in cream cheese or peanut butter in the bathtub to make their life significantly better. But those are the things. Make the change and see how the dog responds. If the stress increases, make a different change. If the stress decreases, you did something great. You made your dog happy. All right, so finally, got some questions. So before we get to the questions, I really want to thank you guys all for attending and being here. So
all great info, Lindsey. Thank you so much. Everybody from the chat seemed that they really enjoyed when we were learning a lot. So
I'm so glad.
We do have several questions that I saw.
Okay.
One was from Donna that said, what would be indicated by a dog entering the room and coming directly up to you and staring at you straight in the eyes and does not move away? And it makes you uncomfortable, and do you think it's a dominance issue?
I'm really careful with the D word. I'm really, really careful with the D word, because we oftentimes use that as a catchphrase to indicate when the dog wants to do something that we don't necessarily want the dog to do. I would have a lot of follow-up questions about that. There are some breeds that are much more likely to make strong eye contact than others. A lot of herding breeds, cattle dogs, border collies, Australian shepherds, will often like stare into your soul, but it's because they love you so much. But if it's making you uncomfortable, there's probably a reason for that. Oftentimes when we're interacting with a dog or we're looking at a dog and like, you know, the hair goes up on the back of your neck, that's an indicator that the dog is actually giving some subtle body language that our brains are picking up on the back end, even if we can't necessarily articulate what it is that we're seeing. So like that one picture that I showed of the brown dog who was like making the really hard direct eye contact, if you just look at that dog, you're just looking at a dog. But if you can say, okay, muscle tension, firmly closed mouth, hard eye contact, constricted pupils, then that tells you that it's creepy. So I would want a little bit more information about that before I said what it was. I think that some of it too is like how the dog is positioning themselves. Like, so there are a lot of more subtle things. So before we move on to the next question, I do want to mention that if you have specific questions about your dog and your situation, we do have a behavior helpline that that everyone can call. I've talked to people in Canada on our behavior helpline. Kelly, do you happen to have that number handy?
I do, and I will put it in the chat box right now.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So yeah, if we're not able to answer the very specifics about your question, and you want to talk one-on-one with one of our wonderful behavior and training staff here at San Diego Humane Society, then yeah, please give us a call. We got another question. What is the right time to step into a dog-to-dog interaction if they're your own dogs? And that is really sticky. There are some people that can't abide by, they are uncomfortable with getting a growl. If like there's even a growl between their dogs, that's too much for them. And for other folks, So in my home, and I am saying this, you know, don't do this at home. Like, I know my dogs, I know their limits, I know how they interact. But oftentimes, as you could probably tell from that video, even 2 years and some change on, Shine and Kit will have conversations because there's a little bit of a power struggle going on when there's a resource involved. So for example, the last time they had words with each other, Kit always comes and licks out Shine's dinner bowl when she's done, and so in this particular moment, Shine wasn't quite done when Kit came up to lick her dinner bowl, and she barked and snarled at him, and he barked right back at her, and I yelled, "Hey!" and I clapped my hands real loud, and then they sort of both snorted and shook it off, and that was their altercation. They haven't put teeth on each other. They have a lot of words with each other. Like every couple of months, this will happen where there'll be some resource and they'll have the shouting match and then it'll be done. I don't necessarily think that that's the right choice for everyone. For some folks, that would be a sign that you need to feed your dogs even further away and pick up the bowls as soon as the dogs are done and make sure they don't interact with each other. For my personal home and the way that I know my dogs to interact, I feel safe doing it like that. I think that if there is a resource involved in the question, it doesn't necessarily specify, but it's always safest to remove all resources or keep one dog behind a barrier if there are resources out, if you know there are guarding issues. I think that too, if you have one dog giving signals, back off, I've got a thing right now, and the other dog listens, then that also tells you something, because if you have one dog, you know, remember that slide with the border collie that was yelling at the little pit puppy that was coming near its stick? I'll actually go back to that one. I think. Oh yeah, there it went. Yeah, the puppy's listening. This puppy is listening. So if your dog can correct without there being if the dog can correct without there being an actual teeth on skin, teeth on fur moment, and have the other dog learn, then that tells you something. But that's a big risk to even let it even get to that point. So I don't have an official answer for that, but you know, always safety first. Okay, so
You see the Q&A one?
yeah, I'm looking at it. Yeah, if it's not your own dog, that's a big deal, because that's not a dog that you necessarily have a relationship with. And you know, when we were looking at those pictures of dogs being hugged, dogs will oftentimes be significantly more tolerant to those that they have a relationship with, those that they have a bond with, than those that are unfamiliar or outside of the you know, the family unit. There are a lot of dogs that are okay with their kids, their people, even their other dogs in the home, but do not have the same level of tolerance with unfamiliars. Same way, you know, especially when it comes to resources, think about if you're out to dinner with a friend, you know, back when restaurants were normal, and that person like took their fork and skewered something on your plate and then ate it, you might be a little bit annoyed, especially if it was a really good bite and they didn't ask, but you would not nearly have the same reaction as if a complete stranger walked up and tried to take something off your plate. Or a friend hugging you in the grocery store versus a complete stranger hugging you in the grocery store. We expect our dogs to be totally okay with everyone and their grandmother doing everything to them that their own people do, and have them be okay with it, because we want our dogs to be friendly. But really, they're dogs, and they need to have credit for having feelings and emotions that are very, very similar to ours. They communicate differently, they display things differently, but they do still have those same sets of emotions as we do. They just let us know in a different way.
You ready for another one?
Yeah. What do we got?
So it says, I think it's a dachshund from Sonia, puckers a lot with blowing out his cheeks when at a park, usually when there's like wide open spaces. He'll go spread eagle in strange places. Are these all signs of fear? Because he does a lot of licking. He does a lot of licking himself and wants to lick me, and the whole world seems scary to him. I always must be aware of how he's feeling.
Okay, so, oh, when you say licking himself, do you mean like self-grooming? So one signal, one stress signal is actually displacement display that I didn't mention is actually called a genital check. And that's when a dog like sits down or lays down and turns and licks their genitals or sniffs their genitals. It's a displacement behavior that you see in some dogs more than others. Every dog has a different vocabulary, but some dogs will lick themselves as a sign of stress, as a way of fidgeting to get out of certain situations. And the spread eagle is that like he puts on the brakes on walks? Like, again, there are a lot of oftentimes if you guys have like specific to your dog questions, because everything is so contextual and some of the things are so subtle and finite, you have like it'll be much easier to have a Q&A. That's why whenever I'm working with an adopter who's having a behavior issue, my preference is always to talk on the phone rather than to email, because with email you don't get that open communication.
She said that he will spread eagle on or in a strange place and will not get up. So it sounds like he is very uncomfortable.
Yeah, that sounds like he's shutting down and basically trying to go into like la 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 la. I'm not here. I'm not here.
I get like that
The way I
sometimes
did as
too.
a small child with a blanket. Any last questions? I think we're a minute over. I just had to put my first dog back up on the screen.
Beautiful.
I know. I miss her.
Leslie says, thanks so much. I very much enjoyed the webinar and I learned a lot. Thank you, Leslie. We appreciate you. Leslie was the first person here too.
You were. Yeah,
have to listen to all of our chatter.
The Humane Society offers a ton of behavior and training programs. These pet talks are so great. They're so educational. And yeah, you've got the behavior helpline in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can just reach out to us and we are happy to talk with you about your dogs, because goodness knows we love talking about dogs.
We do. Thank you, Sonia. Hope you learned a lot about your dog. Thank you, everybody. And be sure to tune in tomorrow if you're not busy at 2 o'clock on Facebook Live on our Facebook. We're going to be having our virtual adoption event. So even if you can't adopt, feel free to spread the word. Tell your family, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your cousin. I don't care. Tell everybody. Scream it from the rooftops. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you, and good luck with your dogs and yourselves, and be safe.
Good night, you guys. Take care.
Good night. Thank you, Lindsey. Wonderful job, as always. It's always such a pleasure working with you, even if it's like this. Love ya. Love ya. Oh, wait, we have one more question. Let me see. Oh, it says thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful night.
I got to stop recording, though.
Okay, I'm turning it off. Bye.
Let me stop recording.
Okay.
Okay. And stop. And do you want the cloud to stop recording?